How do you know you're not born for greatness? There's a pretty cool study called the Pygmalion Effect. So in California, researchers did this study where they had students and teachers essentially in on this kind of game, this psychological study they were doing. And what they did was they took a group of the students that were in two different groups, right? They took all normal students and they said to the teachers, not the students, they said to the teachers, hey, these kids are intellectual bloomers. They're going to be brilliant. And then they said, these kids are average. They're going to be just, normal average kids. They're not going to do anything special. And then at the end of the year, they actually researched the students' IQ and their performance and their grades, and they wanted to see what ended up happening. Guess what happened? The students that were told to the teachers that these were intellectual bloomers, they were going to be brilliant, do great things, ended up getting higher grades. But after that, guess what the researchers actually disclosed to the teachers? They told them, hey, these kids had completely average IQs. Now this Pygmalion effect is used to explain all kinds of things. For example, imagine if those teachers didn't know those kids were completely normal. Guess what? They ended up treating them differently because of how they perceived them, how they thought these kids were actually really smart and really brilliant. And it's so interesting because imagine if those kids were also told the same thing. Imagine if those kids were told, hey, you're smart, you're gonna go on to do great things. Imagine if the other group was then told, hey, guess what, Jimmy, you're not that smart. You're not gonna do very well in life. Like, I'm sorry to say, it's just a reality. Steve Jobs, when he was a kid, he was adopted. And some kid was bullying him one day, and I think it might have been a little girl, and she said to him, your parents didn't love you. That's why they gave you up. And his adopted parents actually told him, no, Steve, you were special. That's why we chose you. And this is one of those things that keeps coming back and back and back in his biography and throughout his life. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why he was known for being such a big douche, because he had this huge self-confidence, this over self-confidence surrounding himself. And that was because of something he believed about himself. Now that came from his parents, right? The positive and the negative often comes from the parents, but he believed that about himself. Same as the kids who are doing poor, same as the kids who are doing great. And I just think about it, the kids in ghettos that are told from their, when they're babies, when they're this small, their parents tell them every day, you're a piece of garbage. You're a complete piece of crap. You're not gonna do anything. How do you think these kids internalize that later on in life? How do you think the difference between in your face every single day, you're an idiot, you're a piece of crap, you're not gonna do anything with your life, compare that to a parent that's like, hey, you go after those things you wanna go after. You wanna be a baller? Go do professional basketball, go play, go take those shots. It's completely different. And nothing physically changed except the internal concept of the self. So it's the way the person perceives themselves at the end of the day. Just like the teachers treating the students differently, just like Steve Jobs perceiving himself differently and thus acting differently, just like kids in the ghetto that get stuck because they aren't surrounded by positive role models, they aren't surrounded by positive self-talk, positive talk from their parents. Go after your dreams, like, are you mad? It's many of the people at the very bottom and at the very top, they are the exact same. There is no difference whatsoever besides that internal conception, the internal perception of themselves and how they view themselves. A lot of the most successful people in history floundered until way later in life. And sometimes it was just a matter of changing the way they perceive themselves. Charles Darwin was measuring and studying friggin' barnacles for something like 10 years. And it wasn't until 50 or after 50 that he published On the Origin of Species, the famous thing that every scientist in the world knows him for today. Every kid in elementary school knows Charles Darwin. It wasn't Colonel Sanders, the dude, the KFC dude, you see on commercials? He was like 65 and was coming off decades of failures, decades of just having no money. And it was after 65, he was still broke at 65 before he ended up building the KFC brand. When I was in school, I used to have this friend named Ray. Hopefully he's not watching this, but in any case, Ray was like the typical student who was a bad student, right? He was always being noisy, he always was very ADD, he was always not paying attention to the teachers, always getting scolded, and always basically reinforcing the way that he was taught to think about himself. So the teachers always told him, Ray, you're being so disruptive. Ray, you're not a good student. Like, you need to work harder. Ray, you're not doing things right. Basically, all he was hearing was, Ray, you're stupid. right? And I guarantee that's what he heard back at home, because he was sent to juvie. He was sent to all these kind of punishments with, priests and nuns, send away camps and all that kind of stuff. He was always getting punished, discouraged, and told, basically, you're an idiot, dude. That's what he kept saying. In his head, the invisible is the most important thing. It is way more important than all the other stuff you see. The invisible, because Ray kept telling himself, essentially, I'm dumb, I'm an idiot. So of course he would screw around. He didn't have any reason to try to act smart. But imagine if one of the teachers came up to him and pulled him aside and was like, Ray, listen, dude, listen. I get that maybe it's hard to focus in this class. This may not be your favorite class. And I get that maybe you don't like school very much. And maybe at home, maybe your parents are very strict and they tell you all these things. But guess what, dude? I think you're a genius. You're super smart, man. You're super, super smart. Just do a little bit more work. You'll get great grades. And then if the teacher was accommodating for that, imagine if the teacher, every single class was like, great job, even though we got a C. Like, awesome job, dude, I really liked it. We just need to improve a few things. Imagine if he was told that consistently over time. It's like taking the kid out of the ghetto who's told he's a complete waste of life. Send him into a loving household that's like, hey, you're doing great. Just keep working. You'll get there. Keep going. Imagine the difference that Ray would have gone down. I don't even know where he is or who he is at this point. He's probably a crackhead somewhere. Imagine if the parent and the teacher were both like, guess what? You're gonna do awesome things. He would have gone on to prove them right. He would have gone on to prove them right after all of that. And it's just, sometimes the story you tell yourself is more powerful than reality itself. So I wanna ask yourself today, you need to ask yourself, what is the story you are telling yourself about why you are in the place you are, and why maybe you have or have not achieved the things you have? And reiterate the fact that the story in your head that you tell yourself is more important than the facts, than reality. So what story are you going to tell yourself about why you deserve or don't deserve greatness?